346 people, 2 crashes, 5 months, and 1 line of code written to hide a design flaw. In 2018, the Boeing 737 MAX was the fastest-selling jet in aviation history. Airlines loved the fuel savings. Pilots trusted the Boeing name. Passengers boarded unaware that their plane had been engineered to deceive them, and that the deception had a kill switch. This isn't a story of technical failure. This is what happens when accountants overrule engineers, when regulators become lobbyists, and when cost savings becomes a death sentence. Welcome to the Autopsy. This is the Boeing 737 MAX. To understand the catastrophe, meet the company that built the weapon. Boeing, founded 1916, Seattle's pride, America's largest exporter. The company that built the B-17, the 747, the Dreamliner. Their engineering culture was legendary. Safety first wasn't a slogan, it was religion. Then came the merger. 1997. Boeing acquired McDonnell Douglas. The cultures collided. Boeing's engineers versus McDonnell's bean counters. The bean counters won. The headquarters moved to Chicago, away from the factories. The CEO stopped being an engineer and started being a financier. Stock buybacks replaced R&D. The 787 Dreamliner was outsourced globally, wings from Japan, fuselage from Italy, assembled in South Carolina by non-union workers. Quality control became a spreadsheet. By 2011, Boeing was desperate. Airbus had launched the A320neo. New engines, 15% fuel savings, immediate sales success. Boeing needed a response. Fast, cheap, without designing a new plane. The 737 MAX was born. Same airframe as the 1960s original, same landing gear, same cockpit layout, but new, larger engines, so large they didn't fit under the wing. The engines had to move forward and up. This changed the plane's aerodynamics. At high angle of attack, the nose would pitch up unexpectedly. The plane could stall. The engineering solution was a software patch, MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. 1 sensor, 1 line of code. If the sensor said the plane was pitching up, MCAS would force the nose down, automatically, without pilot override, without proper documentation. The MAX was certified in 2017. Boeing told airlines no simulator training was needed, saving $1 million per plane. The FAA, captured by decades of regulatory outsourcing, approved it. The body looked like a Boeing. It flew like a death trap. Let's open the black boxes. The disease was institutional, cultural, and criminal. First, the MCAS architecture. 1 angle of attack sensor. 1. Commercial jets typically use 3 sensors and vote out the anomaly. The MAX used 1 because 2 sensors would require simulator training. Because simulator training would cost money. Because Boeing had promised airlines no additional training. The sensor could fail. Ice, bird strike, manufacturing defect. If it failed high, MCAS thought the plane was stalling and pushed the nose down. If pilots pulled up to correct, MCAS pushed down again, and again, every 5 seconds, with more force each time. The pilots were fighting the software, and the software was designed to win. Second, the documentation fraud. Boeing's flight manual mentioned MCAS once, briefly, as a system that improves handling characteristics. It didn't say MCAS could override pilot commands. It didn't say the system could trigger repeatedly. It didn't say how to disable it. The checklist for runaway stabilizer, the emergency procedure, was buried. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 pilots found it, but too late. They were flying 500 miles per hour toward the ground, reading a manual that lied to them. Third, the regulatory capture. The FAA, under pressure to approve planes quickly, outsourced certification to Boeing employees. Boeing marked its own homework. The MCAS safety analysis assumed hazardous failure, not catastrophic. The difference allowed single-sensor architecture. The difference killed 346 people. Emails later revealed Boeing engineers knew. This airplane is designed by clowns, who in turn are supervised by monkeys, one wrote. Another discussing MCAS. I basically lied to the regulators, unknowingly. A third after the first crash. I don't know how to fix these issues. We need a plan to make the MAX safe without hurting the business case. The business case, the phrase that killed. Every safety fix was weighed against cost. Simulator training? Too expensive. Redesign the landing gear for proper engine fit? Too expensive. Add a second sensor? Too expensive. Ground the fleet after Lion Air? Too expensive. Fourth, the criminal conspiracy. Boeing hid the MCAS changes from the FAA after certification. They discovered the system was more aggressive than disclosed. 0.6 degrees of stabilizer movement became 2.5 degrees. They didn't report it. They updated the software quietly, hoping no one would notice. After Lion Air Flight 610 crashed into the Java Sea, 189 dead, Boeing blamed the pilots, foreign pilots, third world maintenance, anything but the plane. They issued a bulletin about the angle of attack sensor, buried the MCAS details, and kept the fleet flying. 5 months later, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed. Same sequence, sensor error, MCAS activation, nose down, pilots fighting, ground impact at 700 miles per hour, everyone dead. The wreckage was so fragmented, investigators needed DNA to identify victims. The world finally grounded the MAX. 3 days too late for 157 people. The bleeding was global, institutional, and irreversible. March 13, 2019. President Trump, reluctantly, after every other country had acted, grounds the MAX in the U.S., 372 planes parked. Airlines cancel 8,000 flights weekly. Boeing's stock drops $25 billion in value in days. The investigations were brutal. The Department of Justice opened a criminal probe. Congress held hearings. Dennis Muilenburg, Boeing CEO, testified before cameras, apologized to victims' families, and admitted nothing. He was fired in December 2019 with $62 million in severance. The families got $1.5 million per victim from a compensation fund. Some refused it. They wanted trials. The internal documents leaked, the clowns and monkeys email, the "I lied to regulators" admission, the calculation that simulator training would cost $1 million per plane, and 5,000 planes were sold, so $5 billion in savings justified the risk. The FAA's reputation collapsed. They had certified a plane that killed 346 people. They had outsourced oversight to Boeing employees. They had accepted Boeing's risk assessments without independent verification. The gold standard of aviation regulation was lead. The MAX was grounded for 20 months. Boeing redesigned MCAS. 2 sensors required, pilot override always available, documentation rewritten. But the damage was permanent. Airlines canceled orders. Airbus gained market share. China, Boeing's largest growth market, turned to domestic alternatives. Then came the second wave. COVID-19 devastated aviation. Boeing, already bleeding, hemorrhaged cash. They borrowed $25 billion from private markets. They fired 30,000 workers. The 787 Dreamliner production halted for quality defects, drilled holes in the wrong place, debris left inside fuselages. The culture of cost-cutting had infected every program. January 2021. Boeing settled with the DOJ, $2.5 billion fine, deferred prosecution agreement. No individual executives charged. The press release called it accountability. The families called it a deal. The MAX returned to service in late 2020. Passengers board now, mostly unaware. Some refuse. MAX becomes a booking filter on travel sites. The plane flies safely, redesigned, humbled. But 346 people don't fly anywhere. Their families don't accept the redesign. The Y incision, the precise cut that reveals cause of death, points to 2011. The moment Boeing's board chose the MAX over a clean sheet design. The moment they prioritized stock buybacks over engineering excellence. The moment they moved headquarters to Chicago, away from the factories, and told the world, "We are a financial company that happens to make airplanes." That was the kill shot. Not because the MAX was inevitable, but because the culture that built it was. Once accountants overruled engineers, MCAS was inevitable. Once regulators were captured, single-sensor architecture was inevitable. Once no additional training became a sales promise, the crashes were inevitable. The autopsy proves the 737 MAX was dead on the drawing board. Every flight was a dice roll. Lion Air and Ethiopian were unlucky rolls, but the dice were loaded. The incision reveals the true horror. Boeing knew. The engineers who wrote Clowns and Monkeys knew. The managers who buried MCAS documentation knew. The executives who blamed foreign pilots knew. They chose the lie because the truth would have cost $5 billion and years of delay. They chose wrong. The price was 346 lives, $20 billion in direct costs, and a century of engineering reputation, incinerated in 5 months of silence. The lesson of the MAX isn't software can kill, it's deeper. When financial engineering overrides aeronautical engineering, metal falls from the sky. When regulators become partners instead of police, corporations become careless. When shareholder value becomes the only metric, human value becomes zero. Boeing had the talent. They had the history. They had the warning signs. Lion Air was the canary. They chose to keep flying because stopping would hurt the stock price. In business, there are no savings worth killing for. The spreadsheet doesn't measure grief. The earnings call doesn't hear the black box. And 346 people don't care about your quarterly guidance. This was the profit autopsy. Next case, Quibi.